The Xar'uk fleet hovered ominously at the edge of Earth's solar system, their enormous spiked ships silhouetted against the distant stars. For centuries, the Xar'uk had established themselves as the apex predator of the galaxy, sweeping through star systems with unmatched power and ruthlessness. To them, Earth was another small blip, a primitive backwater planet to be brought under control, or destroyed if it dared resist. On Earth, the warning signals came too late. By the time humanity detected the Xar'uk's arrival, their armada had already begun its slow, relentless march toward the inner planets. Military and scientific satellites whirred into overdrive, capturing the first images of the alien fleet. As analysts processed the data, panic spread through command centers worldwide. Earth was a peaceful planet by comparison, its defense systems built to ward off minor threats, but not to combat a full-scale invasion from an enemy that was technologically superior. In a secure bunker beneath the Earth's surface, key leaders from multiple nations gathered around holographic displays, their faces shadowed by tension. Some argued to open communications, others pressed for immediate military action, while a third group insisted on surrender to avoid total annihilation. Amid the chaos, Captain Elara Quinn, an experienced leader from Earth's elite defense division, stood silent, watching the Xar'uk fleet approach with an intensity in her eyes. "This isn't just an invasion," she finally spoke, her voice cutting through the arguments. "They're here to make an example of us. The Xar'uk don't negotiate, they conquer." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Elara had spent years studying alien tactics, and was renowned for her ability to think 10 steps ahead. She knew this wasn't just another hostile force. The Xar'uk were infamous for their ruthless efficiency and the devastating technology that left entire planets uninhabitable. The question wasn't whether humanity could survive the attack. The question was how long they could hold out. Suddenly, a transmission crackled over the comm system. The voice was deep, guttural, and laced with an edge of malice. "Humans of Earth," it began, "you stand on the threshold of extinction. Submit to the Xar'uk Empire or face annihilation. You have one planetary rotation to decide." A shiver ran through the room as everyone absorbed the alien's words. Elara's jaw clenched. "We're not submitting," she said firmly, her eyes blazing with determination. "We've spent too long building, advancing, striving for unity. This is our world, and we won't surrender it without a fight." The decision was made. Earth's defense forces, though outmatched, scrambled to prepare. Pilots, soldiers, and scientists rushed into action, loading weapons, calibrating defenses, and running through simulations. They knew their tech was limited against an enemy like the Xar'uk, but hope flickered as they gathered, unified in the face of the impending threat. In her command station, Elara ran through the last details with her second-in-command, Lieutenant Jax Carter. Jax, a former engineer turned combat pilot, had an unbreakable loyalty to Elara and Earth. His face was set in grim determination as he glanced over the plan. "You think we've got a shot?" Elara looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "Not an easy one, but yes, we're not completely defenseless, and we're certainly not helpless. The Xar'uk don't know what humans are capable of when we're cornered. They've never fought against people who have everything to lose." The command center buzzed with energy as Elara gave her final orders. Key positions around the globe were activated. Orbital defense platforms, ground-based laser turrets, and missile silos aimed skyward. Satellite networks linked every human soldier, each pulse of data weaving together a global defense web. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best Earth had to offer. The Xar'uk ships advanced, their sleek metallic hulls glinting ominously as they entered Earth's atmosphere. Smaller fighter vessels broke off from the main fleet, speeding toward Earth's defense platforms with deadly precision. Elara and her team watched on the monitors as the Xar'uk's ships effortlessly cut through the first line of orbital defenses, barely slowed by Earth's initial volley of missiles and energy blasts. Elara clenched her fists, feeling a mixture of dread and fury. The Xar'uk hadn't even bothered to shield their smaller ships fully, confident that Earth's defenses couldn't reach them. They were wrong. "Elara to all units," she spoke over the comms. "Commence Operation Defiance." From hidden silos scattered around the planet, an array of new, experimental weapons activated. Designed by Earth's brightest minds, these weapons had never seen live combat before. High-energy plasma cannons, EMP charges, and magnetic railguns fired in unison, targeting the weak points in the Xar'uk's vessels. Explosions blossomed in the sky as several alien ships were hit, their trajectories spinning wildly before crashing into Earth's oceans or mountains. For a moment, a surge of hope filled the command center. The Xar'uk ships weren't invincible after all. They bled, and they could be beaten, But the victory was short-lived. The remaining Xar'uk ships adjusted their formation, reinforcing their defenses and concentrating their firepower on human installations. Waves of deadly plasma erupted from their ships, reducing Earth's orbital platforms to twisted wreckage in seconds. In the chaos, Elara's ship took a direct hit. The impact jolted her violently against her seat, alarms blaring as the ship's systems struggled to recover. Smoke filled the cockpit, but she forced herself to remain focused. This was far from over. "Status report," she shouted, pulling herself upright and assessing the situation. Jax's voice crackled over the comms, laced with static. "We've got hull breaches across all sectors and most of our weapons are down. It's bad, Captain, but we're not out yet." Elara gritted her teeth. This battle was spiraling into desperation, but she knew they couldn't give up. Every minute they held the Xar'uk back was another minute for Earth civilians to prepare, to flee, or to arm themselves. With grim resolve, Elara rallied her remaining forces. "We're not done. They may think they've won, but we're just getting started. All units, regroup and prepare for close combat. We're going to make them regret coming to our world." As Earth's defense forces scrambled to their positions, the Xar'uk command ship loomed larger, filling the sky with its menacing silhouette. Elara knew they'd need more than weapons to win. They'd need every ounce of resilience, cunning, and courage humanity could muster. This was only the beginning, and for humanity, there was no turning back. The Xar'uk ships pressed forward, sweeping Earth's defenses with calculated brutality. As their relentless attack continued, Earth's fleet reformed in low orbit, bracing for an all-or-nothing counteroffensive. This was Operation Defiance, humanity's final, desperate move to stand up to an enemy that seemed as implacable as they were ruthless. Captain Elara Quinn sat in the command seat of the Resolute, her face lit only by the glow of radar screens showing the Xar'uk advancing on every side. "Elara, to all ships, prepare for full engagement," she ordered. Her voice was calm, unwavering. Each word was a lifeline, a final assurance to the scattered fleet that they still had a fighting chance. She knew they were outgunned, but she also knew that humanity had faced impossible odds before. Lieutenant Jax Carter's face appeared on her console, a faint smirk on his lips even under the tense circumstances. "Do you ever wonder what they'll say about us after this, Captain?" Elara raised an eyebrow, her own expression softening for a brief moment. "If we make it through this, Jax, they'll say we were fools for thinking we could fight them, but if we don't try, there'll be no one left to say anything at all." Jax grinned, a glimmer of that unbreakable human spirit shining through. "Then let's give them something to remember." As he cut the feed, Elara turned her attention back to the battle, watching the incoming waves of Xar'uk fighters darting toward her fleet. In mere seconds, the skies above Earth erupted with the clash of energy blasts, plasma torpedoes, and railgun rounds, forming a deadly dance of light and destruction. Earth ships were agile but small, weaving between the larger Xar'uk vessels and launching short bursts of retaliatory fire whenever they spotted an opening. Elara's own ship, the Resolute, moved with practiced precision. Each maneuver, each tactical decision she made, was calculated to minimize losses while maximizing damage. The Xar'uk ships were sturdy but predictable, their tactics more direct and brute force than Earth's fleet was used to. Jax's voice crackled over the comm again. "Captain, I've got a shot at one of the big ones. Permission to engage?" Elara didn't hesitate. "Take it, Lieutenant. Make it count." Jax's fighter shot forward, diving through the chaos as he locked his target. A Xar'uk cruiser positioned at the center of their formation. The Xar'uk ship's shields were thick, but Earth's military had recently developed high-impact plasma charges, designed specifically for piercing dense shielding. Jax's ship released a volley, the plasma charges glowing blue as they cut through space and impacted the Xar'uk's shields, causing a cascade of explosions. The cruiser's defenses wavered, a breach appearing in its hull. For a moment, hope surged through the Earth fleet as Jax's assault encouraged other pilots to target the weakened cruiser. However, the Xar'uk responded quickly, repositioning their fleet to shield the damaged ship and counterattacked with ferocious precision. One by one, human ships were blasted out of formation, sending debris spiraling down to Earth's surface below. "Focus fire on the breach," Elara's voice cut through the comms, urging the remaining pilots to target the Xar'uk cruiser's exposed core. Another wave of plasma charges hit the cruiser, causing a massive explosion that tore through its hull. A cheer rippled through the fleet as the first Xar'uk ship fell, but Elara knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The destruction of the cruiser only seemed to anger the Xar'uk. Their fighters doubled back, concentrating their fire on the ships that had taken down their ally. Elara watched as 3 of her squad's ships were hit in rapid succession, bursting into flame before disintegrating. "Regroup," "We need to stay coordinated," Elara commanded, her voice sharp. "This isn't just about strength, we have to outsmart them." The Xar'uk fleet began to tighten their formation, closing off any weak spots, creating a wall of firepower. Elara's ships struggled to find openings, the ferocity of the alien onslaught pushing them back toward Earth's atmosphere. Inside the Resolute, alarms blared as the ship's shielding began to fail under the intense barrage. Jax's voice broke through the chaos again. "Captain, shields are down to 30%. We're not going to make it at this rate." Elara's mind raced, quickly calculating their options. They couldn't keep this up. Their only chance was to disrupt the Xar'uk from within their formation. She keyed into the comms, addressing her whole fleet. "All units, execute Maneuver Phoenix. We're taking this fight to them, up close and personal." Maneuver Phoenix was risky. It involved diving into the core of the enemy fleet and attacking them at close range, where the Xar'uk's long-range weaponry would be less effective. Earth's ships, though smaller, were nimbler. If they could get in close, they could do serious damage. With a surge of adrenaline, Elara's fleet dove toward the Xar'uk's heart. Plasma and laser fire streamed across her field of vision as the Xar'uk desperately tried to counter their approach. Jax led his squadron through the maze of alien ships, dodging incoming fire with precision. In moments, Earth's fleet had broken into the center of the Xar'uk formation. "Target their weapon systems and engines," Elara barked, unleashing a barrage of missiles at a nearby Xar'uk destroyer. Her crew's fingers flew over the controls, feeding targeting data to the fleet as they coordinated their assault. One by one, the Xar'uk ships began to lose their maneuverability. A destroyer exploded, then another, but the human fleet was taking heavy losses too. Each time a Xar'uk ship fell, 3 more of Earth's ships were destroyed in response. Jax's voice came over the comm, tense. "We're losing too many, Captain. We're not going to last at this rate." Elara gritted her teeth. She knew he was right. They were buying time, but at a staggering cost. Her mind churned, looking for a way to turn the tide. Suddenly, a thought struck her. "Jax, do you remember that old maneuver from training? The one we swore we'd never try in real combat?" Jax hesitated, understanding dawning in his voice. "The slingshot loop? Captain, that's insane." "Insane, but maybe our best chance," Elara replied. "If we time it right, we can catch them off guard. Rally the fleet and prepare for the maneuver." Jax's hesitation faded, replaced by determination. "Understood, Captain. Executing slingshot loop on your mark." The Resolute and the remaining ships accelerated, pushing their engines to the limit as they approached the Xar'uk command vessel. At the last moment, they cut power to half throttle, slingshotting around the command vessel at a steep angle. The Xar'uk, caught off guard, scrambled to retarget, creating a window of opportunity. As Earth's ships looped back, they opened fire on the exposed rear engines of the Xar'uk ships, causing widespread damage to their formation. The Xar'uk fleet began to falter, several ships spinning out of control as explosions rippled through their ranks. Elara's voice filled the comms, steadier than ever. "We may be outnumbered, but we're not outmatched. Let's show them what humans are made of." As Earth's fleet pressed the advantage, Elara couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Xar'uk still held the upper hand in numbers and power, but in that moment, humanity had given them a reason to fear. The chaotic hum of alarms and flickering emergency lights filled the Resolute, casting an eerie glow across the command bridge. Captain Elara Quinn gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white as she surveyed the damage reports. Earth's fleet had landed a blow against the Xar'uk, but their victory was costly. Ships lay scattered across space like shattered glass, and the enemy's larger vessels were regrouping, preparing for a retaliatory strike that would dwarf the first assault. "Captain, structural integrity on all decks is critical," came Jax's voice over the comms, tinged with the tension of their precarious situation. "If we don't pull back soon, we're done for." Elara weighed their options. The Resolute was one of the few ships still operational, though heavily damaged. They had no choice but to retreat and regroup if they wanted to have a chance of surviving the next attack. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "All units, this is Captain Quinn. Fall back to Rally Point Omega. We'll regroup there and reassess our position." Jax's squadron fell in line behind her, their engines flaring as the battered fleet disengaged from the Xar'uk forces. The withdrawal wasn't without resistance. Xar'uk fighters pursued them, cutting down a few more ships before human forces finally made it to the relative safety of an abandoned research outpost on the dark side of Earth's moon. The outpost had been mothballed for years, but its reinforced structures would provide cover for their remaining ships while they made emergency repairs. As the fleet settled into orbit, Elara felt the weight of loss settling heavily on her shoulders. They'd lost too many, and those who survived were exhausted, their morale frayed by the relentless assault. She knew that if they were to continue fighting, they needed more than just a tactical edge. They needed hope. Her command crew gathered in the dimly lit war room, faces tense but determined. Elara cleared her throat, addressing them with a steady voice. "We've taken a hit and there's no denying it, but the Xar'uk don't know who they're dealing with. They think we're on the ropes, but humans, we fight hardest when our backs are against the wall." The room remained silent, but she could see the spark reigniting in their eyes. She turned to Jax, who stood by her side with a calculating expression. "What do we have left, Lieutenant?" Jax tapped his data pad, pulling up their remaining resources. "Not much, Captain. We've got enough to make some basic repairs, but weapons and fuel are running low. Most of our ships won't withstand another direct assault without something new to tip the scales." As if on cue, a young engineer named Mako, new to the Resolute's crew, raised his hand. "Captain, we managed to salvage some tech from a downed Xar'uk ship. We've been analyzing their armor systems, and it turns out they have a weak spot near the energy core, something we could potentially exploit with high-precision targeting." Elara's gaze sharpened. "How soon can you have a prototype ready?" "We're already working on modifications for our railguns," Mako replied, "but it'll take time, at least a couple of hours for the test phase." "Get it done," Elara ordered, the first glimmer of hope threading through her voice. "If we can use their own armor against them, we may have a chance." The crew dispersed, each member throwing themselves into the work of fortifying the Resolute and arming the remaining ships with the new weapon mods. As repairs progressed, Elara took a moment to check in with her team, bolstering their spirits as they prepared for the next round. She found herself thinking back to humanity's long history of survival against the odds, of the tenacity that had carried them from Earth's earliest days through countless challenges. Hours passed, and the outpost bustled with activity as Mako and his team finalized the new weapons. Finally, he reported back, his face glowing with excitement. "Captain, we've managed to retrofit the railguns with an adjustable frequency that can penetrate Xar'uk armor at the weak points we identified. It's crude, but it should work." Elara's lips curved into a rare smile. "Excellent work, Mako. Let's hope it's enough." Just as she prepared to give the order to mobilize, her comms crackled to life. The voice on the other end was distorted but unmistakable. It was a distress signal. "This is General Halleck of the Tezan Resistance. Our outpost is under attack by Xar'uk forces. Request immediate assistance." Elara frowned, recalling intelligence reports on the Tezan, a nomadic alien race nearly wiped out by the Xar'uk decades earlier. They had scattered across the galaxy, fighting guerrilla style to survive, much like humanity now. Helping them would risk thinning their already depleted resources, but Elara couldn't ignore the parallels. The Tezan's survival was humanity's struggle too. "Captain," Jack said quietly, reading her expression, "we're stretched thin. Are you sure about this?" She nodded. "Resolute. The Xar'uk may have power, but we have allies, Lieutenant, and we're going to need every one of them if we want to see this fight through. Set a course for the Tezan outpost." Earth's fleet mobilized once more, this time heading toward the coordinates provided by the Tezan distress signal. They arrived just as the Xar'uk launched another assault on the Tezan settlement. As Earth's ships swooped in, the Xar'uk, taken by surprise, found themselves outflanked. "Open fire!" Elara's voice rang out over the comms as her fleet joined forces with the Tezan fighters. The Xar'uk fought back fiercely, but with the newly upgraded railguns, humanity's forces managed to target and exploit their weak points. Several Xar'uk ships faltered, their defenses compromised. For the first time, the combined human and Tezan forces gained the upper hand, picking off the Xar'uk ships one by one. The Tezan fighters, though small, were nimble, dodging in and out of the firefight with expert precision, working seamlessly alongside the human pilots. In the middle of the battle, a massive Xar'uk destroyer bore down on them, its guns blazing. "Jax, on my mark!" Elara shouted. Jax's ship darted into position beside her as they locked their upgraded railguns onto the destroyer's exposed core. 3, 2, 1, fire! Both ships unleashed their full payload, the modified rounds tearing through the Xar'uk's core in a fiery explosion. The destroyer shuddered and erupted, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. With their flagship down, The remaining Xar'uk ships scrambled to retreat, vanishing into the vastness of space. As silence fell, Elara surveyed the debris field around them. Against all odds, they'd managed to repel the Xar'uk again, and with the Tezan by their side, they were no longer alone in the fight. A transmission from General Xar'uk came through, his voice weary but grateful. "You saved us, Captain Quinn," Xar'uk said. "The Xar'uk claimed no species could ever resist them, but today, we proved them wrong. Perhaps together we have a chance." Elara nodded, feeling the weight of their shared struggle. "The Xar'uk underestimated humanity, and the strength we find in alliances. They'll regret that. This is just the beginning." The battle had given them a glimpse of victory, a reminder of what they were fighting for. With their newfound allies and their upgraded weapons, humanity was no longer standing alone in the void. They had gained an ally in the Tezan, and a powerful weapon in their arsenal. As the fleet regrouped, Elara knew the war was far from over, but now they had a fighting chance. The quiet hum of activity filled the command center, as Earth's forces and their new Tezan allies regrouped in the makeshift war room on the abandoned lunar outpost. The recent victory had energized both the humans and the Tezan, giving them a rare glimmer of hope against the seemingly unstoppable Xar'uk. For the first time, they saw a path forward, albeit a treacherous one. Captain Elara Quinn surveyed the gathering. Tezan General Xar'uk stood across from her, his tall, slender form cloaked in armor made of interwoven organic fibers. His intense amber eyes flickered with a quiet resilience, a fire kindled from years of resistance against the Xar'uk. Around them, human and Tezan strategists and soldiers crowded together, leaning over data screens and tactical maps as they analyzed every scrap of intelligence they had on the Xar'uk. Elara turned to Jax, who was adjusting his display, cataloging the salvageable supplies from the recent battle. "We need a plan that doesn't just survive the next assault. We need something that will finally push them back for good." Jax nodded, his eyes scanning the lists. "Captain, we've got enough materials to make minor repairs, but we're stretched thin. We need more than just tech and ammo. We need intel, inside information that could turn the tide." Xar'uk, who had been silently observing, stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "You're right, Captain Quinn. The Xar'uk have underestimated humanity, but they're also relentless. When they realize you've joined forces with us, they'll retaliate with even greater force. There's only one way to truly challenge them: strike at the heart of their command." Elara looked up, her curiosity piqued. "Their command center? You know where it is?" Xar'uk nodded slowly. "It's a heavily fortified base on a barren world known as Karun. It's where they control their fleets, and it's also where they house their most advanced technology. We attempted an infiltration years ago, but we were forced to withdraw when we realized their security was stronger than we anticipated." One of the human engineers, Mako, looked up from his station. "With the upgrades we've made to our weapons, we might stand a chance at breaking through their defenses, but we'd need a precise plan. Charging in without a strategy would be suicide." Xar'uk tilted his head thoughtfully. "That's why we'll need to play on the Xar'uk's overconfidence. They believe no species can match them, which makes them prone to underestimate smaller incursions. If we create a distraction, a false attack in one region, we could send a small, elite team to infiltrate Karun undetected." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Elara's mind was already spinning with the possibilities. A direct assault was out of the question, but a covert strike team targeting their command base could work. It was risky, but it would give them the advantage they desperately needed. "All right," Elara said, her voice steady. "Let's do this. We'll split our forces. I'll lead a small team to infiltrate Karun, while the rest of our fleet launches a diversionary attack on their closest outpost." She looked at Xar'uk, whose calm expression belied a lifetime of struggle. "I need your best operatives on this mission, General. People who know the Xar'uk defenses as well as you do." Xar'uk inclined his head. "You'll have them, Captain Quinn, and if we succeed, we might finally have the leverage to end this war." As preparations began, Elara selected her infiltration team carefully. Jax was her first choice naturally. His knowledge of ship systems and knack for improvisation made him an invaluable asset. Mako, too, was vital for his technical expertise, especially if they encountered advanced Xar'uk tech. From the Tezan, Xar'uk chose 3 elite operatives: Xara, a stealth specialist; Kyle, an expert in Xar'uk language and encryption; and Nara, a skilled strategist with a sharp tactical mind. As the team assembled in the shuttle bay, Elara briefed them on the mission's objectives. Our primary goal is to gather intelligence on the Xar'uk's command network. Anything we can use to disrupt their operations and level the playing field. If we can hack into their communications or disable their defenses, it'll give our fleet a fighting chance in the main battle. Jax nodded, his face tense but resolute. And if things go south? Elara's gaze hardened. Then we get out with whatever we've got. This mission isn't about heroics. It's about survival and securing an advantage. We're not here to die needlessly. With the briefing complete, the team boarded a small, stealth-modified shuttle equipped with cloaking technology, scavenged from both human and Tezan designs. As they launched into the vastness of space, Elara felt the weight of the mission settle heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just another battle. This was a critical strike that could change the course of the war. The journey to Karun was tense and silent, each member of the team mentally preparing for the mission ahead. Finally, as they approached the barren, rocky planet, Xar'uk directed them to an unmonitored landing site hidden within a range of jagged cliffs. The atmosphere was thin, the sky a muted gray, casting everything in an eerie half-light. The team moved cautiously, staying low as they navigated through the rocky landscape. Xar'uk drones patrolled the area, their sensors sweeping methodically across the ground. Xara, the stealth expert, led the way, signaling when the path was clear. They moved in near silence, communicating only with brief hand signals and head nods. As they approached the command complex, Kale signaled to Elara, his voice a low whisper over the comms. The main entrance is heavily guarded, but there's an auxiliary tunnel that leads directly to the server room. I've mapped it based on old intel from our last attempt. If it's still there, it could get us in without being detected. Elara nodded, motioning for the team to follow Kyle. They slipped into the narrow tunnel, moving quickly but carefully. The sound of distant machinery hummed through the walls, vibrating under their boots as they descended deeper into the Xar'uk base. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the server room. Banks of servers lined the walls, each humming with a faint, ominous glow. Kyle immediately set to work, plugging in a device designed to hack into the Xar'uk's encrypted communications. Mako, keep an eye on the door, Elara ordered. Jax, prep the data drives. We're not leaving without as much intel as we can carry. The seconds ticked by in tense silence as Kale worked, his hands flying over the alien control panel. Finally, he glanced up, his face alight with excitement. I've accessed their fleet coordination files. If we download this, we'll have every command order, every patrol route, and every tactical adjustment they've made in the past cycle. Elara felt a thrill of victory. This was more than she'd hoped for. Good work, Kale. Get as much as you can. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared, and red lights flashed across the room. Elara's heart sank as Xara's voice came through the comm, urgent and tense. We've got company. Drones incoming. The team sprang into action. Mako rigged a makeshift explosive at the entrance, setting it to detonate as soon as the drones entered. Kale continued downloading the files, his movements frantic but precise. Elara took position by the doorway, readying her weapon as the whirring of approaching drones grew louder. The explosive detonated, filling the tunnel with smoke and debris. The team took the opportunity to slip out through a secondary exit, clutching the data drives they had risked everything to retrieve. As they emerged back into the rocky terrain, Elara caught her breath, the adrenaline still pumping through her veins. Let's get back to the shuttle, she ordered, her voice calm despite the rush of the mission's success. They had what they came for. It was time to get home. With the intel they'd gathered, they finally had a chance, and with their alliance stronger than ever, humanity and the Tezan now had the means to strike back. As they sped away from Karun, Elara allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. For the first time, she could see the faintest glimmer of victory on the horizon. The shuttle's engines roared as Captain Elara Quinn and her team sped away from Karun, clutching the stolen data that could change the tide of war. Elara's mind raced as they left the Xar'uk stronghold behind, still reeling from the urgency of their escape. She knew the intel they'd captured held the potential to shift the balance, but she also sensed that the Xar'uk wouldn't let them leave unchallenged. Moments later, a red alert flared across the shuttle's console. Xar'uk patrol ships were approaching fast, their coordinates closing in with relentless precision. Elara tightened her grip on the controls, pushing the shuttle's speed to its limits. We're not out of this yet, she warned, glancing back at her team, who braced themselves for impact. Jax's voice came over the intercom, steady but tense. They're gaining on us, Captain. Shields are at 40% and we're not exactly equipped for heavy combat. Elara's mind worked furiously, searching for options. The shuttle was designed for stealth and speed, not firepower. If the Xar'uk patrols caught up to them, they'd be sitting ducks. She glanced at Kale, who was clutching the data drives as if they were his lifeline. "What's the status on that intel?" she asked. Kale nodded, his face pale but determined. "It's all here, Captain. Every fleet command, every vulnerability. If we can get this back to the fleet, we'll have the advantage we need. Then we're not losing it," Elara replied, her tone resolute. She activated the comms and reached out to the Tezan and Earth forces stationed at the lunar outpost. "Resolute to command. We're under pursuit. Send reinforcements to intercept. We can't afford to lose this intel." Back at the outpost, General Xar'uk immediately mobilized the remaining fleet, dispatching every available ship to provide cover for the shuttle's escape. The combined human and Tezan forces launched into action, speeding toward the designated coordinates. They knew the cost of failure was too high. The intel they were carrying could cripple the Xar'uk's command network, perhaps giving them their only shot at survival. As the shuttle hurtled through the void, the Xar'uk patrol ships closed in, their laser fire streaking past the shuttle's hull. Mako, seated beside Jax, kept a close watch on the console, calling out every fluctuation in the shield levels. "Shields down to 30%, Captain. We can't take many more hits." Elara's jaw clenched. "Hold on just a little longer. Reinforcements are on the way." But the Xar'uk ships were relentless, firing a barrage of plasma bolts that slammed into the shuttle, sending a shudder through the entire craft. Kyle gripped the data drives tighter, his knuckles white. Nara, the Tezan strategist, steadied herself, her gaze fixed ahead. "If we don't make it, make sure the intel survives. Get it to someone who can use it." "We'll all make it," Elara insisted, though doubt crept into her voice as the shuttle's systems strained under the attack. Then, in a flash, the human and Tezan fleet arrived. Dozens of ships burst into view, creating a defensive line between the shuttle and the Xar'uk patrols. Plasma and laser fire erupted as the two forces clashed, each ship fighting with desperate determination. Elara exhaled a sigh of relief, knowing they now had a chance to make it back. However, the Xar'uk response was swift and brutal. Reinforcements poured in from all directions, surrounding the lunar outpost and pressing the combined fleet on all sides. The void around them transformed into a war zone, with explosions lighting up the darkness as ships fell on both sides. Earth and Tezan fighters were outnumbered, and losses mounted with every passing second. In the midst of the chaos, Jax's voice broke through Elara's comms. "Captain, we're taking heavy hits. If we stay here any longer, we won't have any ships left." Elara felt the weight of the decision bearing down on her. Every instinct urged her to hold the line to protect the outpost and her team, but she knew Jax was right. Their fleet was being decimated, and staying would only lead to more losses. Reluctantly, she gave the order. "All units fall back. We're retreating to the secondary outpost at Lagrange Point 4. If we lose any more ships, we'll have no defense left at all." The fleet disengaged, limping away from the battle as the Xar'uk continued their relentless pursuit. Ships filled with wounded soldiers and damaged equipment drifted alongside the shuttle as they made their way to the rendezvous point. Inside the shuttle, Elara surveyed her team, their faces exhausted but resolute. As they docked at the secondary outpost, Elara could feel the tension in the air. She could see it in the wearied eyes of her crew, and in the solemn expressions of the Tezan soldiers who had survived. They had bought themselves a moment's reprieve, but the cost was staggering. Dozens of lives lost, ships destroyed, and morale shattered. Elara gathered her core team in the command center, looking around at each one of them. Jax, Mako, Kyle, Xar'uk, and Nara. The recent battle had forged a bond between them, but she could sense the strain of the relentless war. She placed the data drives Kyle had protected on the table, letting the silence linger as they took in the significance of what they held. "Everything we've sacrificed," she began, her voice low but steady, "has led us to this. We have the intel, and we have the chance to strike back, but it's going to take everything we've got left." Xar'uk, his amber eyes dark with resolve, nodded. "We're with you, Captain. This data, this could be our only chance to expose the Xar'uk's weak points and take the fight to them on our terms." Kyle plugged in the data drives, and the room filled with holographic projections of Xar'uk fleet formations, command protocols, and base coordinates. The Tezan operative moved quickly, mapping out potential vulnerabilities. "Their outposts are connected through a network of command relays," he explained. "If we can disable just one of these key points, it'll disrupt their coordination, slowing their responses and giving us an opening." Mako stepped forward, studying the display. "If we hit the relay on the edge of Xar'uk space, we'd create a blackout along their entire eastern front. It could give us the window we need to launch a full assault on their command base. Elara nodded, feeling a spark of hope. The plan was ambitious, risky, but it was their best shot. She looked around at her team, each one bearing the marks of the battles they'd survived. They had lost much, but their spirits remained unbroken. Then it's settled, she said, determination hardening her tone. We'll strike the relay and go for the command base. We're going to hit them where it hurts. As they prepared for the mission, each member of the team steeled themselves, knowing the risks. The Xar'uk would not expect such a bold move, and if they succeeded, it could tilt the war in their favor. But they also understood that this was likely a one-way mission. They were going up against the full force of the Xar'uk's might, with nothing but hope and resolve to carry them through. Before they departed, Elara gathered her team for one final word. We've come this far because we refuse to give up. Every one of you has given more than you thought possible, and I'm asking you to do it once again. We may be outmatched, but we're not out of this fight. Not yet. With that, the team boarded their ships, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. As they accelerated toward the Xar'uk relay, Elara felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. This was their last stand, their final attempt to turn the tide, and no matter the outcome, they would go down fighting. The battle was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. The fleet pushed forward, their engines roaring as they approached the Xar'uk relay station on the edge of Xar'uk-controlled space. Captain Elara Quinn stood on the command bridge of the Resolute, her face a mask of concentration as she monitored the mission's progress. They had reached the point of no return. This was their moment to strike. If they could disable the relay, the Xar'uk's command network would falter, leaving their forces vulnerable to a coordinated assault on their core systems. Jax's voice crackled over the comms. Captain, we're approaching the target. Scanners show multiple defense turrets and a squadron of patrol ships. They're not expecting us, but they're armed to the teeth. Elara nodded, steeling herself for the assault. All units prepare for combat. We're going in fast and hard. No holding back. Focus fire on the turrets and take down those patrol ships before they can call reinforcements. The fleet surged forward, a mix of human and Tezon ships weaving in formation as they closed in on the relay station. Plasma bolts and laser beams filled the space around them, crisscrossing in deadly patterns as both sides unleashed everything they had. The human and Tezon ships executed precise maneuvers, each one dodging and retaliating in unison. Mako, stationed in the Resolute's weapons control, zeroed in on a turret positioned at the relay's perimeter. Target locked. Firing EMP rounds now. He tapped a command and the ship's modified railguns fired a burst of electromagnetic rounds toward the turret. The rounds hit their mark, short-circuiting the turret's power and rendering it useless. One by one, the defensive turrets fell, each hit accompanied by a cheer from the fleet as they cleared the path to the relay. Meanwhile, Jax and his squadron darted through the fray, drawing enemy fire away from the larger ships. His agile fighter skimmed close to the relay's hull, releasing high-impact charges that detonated on contact, leaving trails of smoke and debris in their wake. The Xar'uk patrol ships responded with brutal efficiency, converging on Jax's position with ruthless precision. His ship shuddered as laser fire streaked across its shields, sparks flying from the console. "Taking heavy fire, Captain," Jax called out, gritting his teeth. "I can't keep this up much longer." Elara clenched her jaw. She knew that if they lost Jax's squadron, they would be left vulnerable. "Hold on, Jax. We're almost there. Reinforcements are moving into position." Halleck's Tezan operatives, having engaged in dozens of guerrilla-style battles against the Xar'uk, moved with practiced expertise. Nara led a small squadron that provided cover for Jax, darting between the patrol ships with precision laser shots that distracted the enemy, giving Jax's squadron the room they needed to breathe. Finally, they reached the heart of the relay station, where the command console was located. Kale worked quickly, accessing the Xar'uk systems from his console. "I'm in," he reported, his fingers flying over the alien controls. "Beginning the hack now. Once I'm in, I'll disable their communication relays, but it's going to take a few minutes." "Make it fast, Kale," Elara urged, her gaze sweeping over the fleet. The Xar'uk were regrouping, their forces growing as additional patrols converged on the relay. They didn't have long before they were completely overwhelmed. As Kale worked, the human and Tezon ships held the line, repelling wave after wave of Xar'uk forces. Explosions rocked the relay as Mako's EMP rounds detonated against critical points in its structure, disrupting the flow of power and leaving sections of the station dark and unresponsive. But the Xar'uk were relentless. A massive cruiser descended upon the fleet, its formidable cannons aimed directly at the Resolute. Elara's hands gripped the controls tightly as the cruiser's weapons fired, unleashing a torrent of plasma that collided with the ship's shields. "Shields at 15%, Mako shouted over the comms, panic in his voice. "We can't take another hit like that." Elara's mind raced. They needed something drastic, something the Xar'uk wouldn't expect. She turned to Jax, an idea forming. "Jax, how much charge do you have left in your fighter's railguns?" "Enough for one last volley," Jax replied, his voice strained but focused. "Then get in close and target their main cannon. If you can take it out, it'll buy us time." Jax didn't hesitate. "Roger that, Captain." Going in hot, he pushed his fighter to maximum speed, weaving through the firefight as he made his way toward the Xar'uk cruiser. The massive vessel loomed above him, its dark metal surface dotted with plasma burns and weapon scars. Jax locked onto the main cannon, aiming carefully before releasing his last volley of high-impact rounds. They struck true, detonating on the cannon's exterior with a blinding flash. The cannon exploded in a shower of metal and fire, leaving the cruiser momentarily stunned. The fleet seized the opening, unleashing a barrage of coordinated fire on the cruiser, damaging its engines and rendering it immobile. A collective cheer echoed over the comms as the Xar'uk ship drifted, disabled. Meanwhile, Kale's voice broke through the chatter. "I've almost got it. Just a few more seconds." Elara held her breath, her gaze locked on the relay. If Kale could complete the hack, the Xar'uk's entire communication network would be compromised, buying them critical time to launch their main assault. But as Kale worked, a new alarm blared on the console. Elara's heart sank as she realized what was happening. The Xar'uk had activated an internal security protocol, triggering a self-destruct sequence for the relay. Red warning lights flashed across Kale's screen, indicating a countdown to detonation. "Kale, get out of there," Elara shouted. "They're going to blow the whole station." Kale's face was pale but resolute. "I'm almost done. I can disable the sequence, but I need another minute." "Jax, Mako, cover him," Elara ordered, her voice tight with urgency. "We can't let him get cut off now." The fleet closed ranks around the relay, their ships forming a defensive shield as Kale frantically worked to bypass the self-destruct mechanism. Sweat dripped down his brow as he entered the final command sequence, his fingers flying over the alien controls. At last, with only seconds to spare, the countdown halted, and the lights flickered back to normal. "I did it!" Kale's voice rang out, triumphant. "The relay is disabled, and their command network is down. They'll be in the dark for hours, maybe longer." Relief surged through the fleet as Elara's voice filled the comms. "Mission accomplished. All units fall back to Rendezvous Point Alpha. We're regrouping and moving forward with Phase 2. As the fleet began its retreat, Kale joined Jax and Mako aboard the Resolute, his face flushed with victory. They had struck a critical blow against the Xar'uk, and for the first time, it felt like they might have a real chance. But their victory was not without a price. The once formidable fleet was battered, their ships limping back to the outpost with damaged hulls and low fuel reserves. Many had lost friends and comrades in the battle, and the weight of those sacrifices hung heavily over them as they regrouped. In the command center, Elara addressed the crew, her voice somber but steady. "Today, we accomplished the impossible. We've dealt a blow to the Xar'uk that they won't recover from easily. But this war isn't over. We're going after their command base next. It won't be easy, and it will cost us more than we can imagine. But if we don't see this through, every sacrifice we've made will be in vain." Her words hung in the air, filling the weary soldiers with a renewed sense of purpose. They had come this far, facing impossible odds with unyielding determination. The final battle loomed ahead, and they knew it would demand everything they had left. With resolve hardening in their hearts, they prepared for the ultimate strike. The Xar'uk would not expect them to press on, to face them with the strength born of unity and resilience. They were ready, and they would not stop until the Xar'uk Empire fell. The battered fleet gathered in the shadow of a distant asteroid field, their ships darkened to avoid detection. They had regrouped after the successful assault on the Xar'uk relay, but the cost was evident in every scorch mark, every shuddering engine, and every empty seat in their cockpits. This was all that remained of Earth's defense forces and the Tezon resistance, a mix of soldiers, survivors, and idealists fighting for their very existence. Captain Elara Quinn stood in the command center of the Resolute, her face a mask of quiet resolve. The time had come. They'd weakened the Xar'uk's network, bought themselves a brief window, and now they were aiming straight at the heart of the Empire. Their target was the Xar'uk's command base, a heavily fortified world bristling with defenses and home to the Xar'uk High Command. If they could take it down, It would send shockwaves through the Xar'uk ranks, destabilizing their grip on the galaxy. Jax leaned over the console beside her, scanning the maps and patrol routes they'd extracted from the relay. So, we've got a slim chance of sneaking in without getting blown apart. Are we calling this a fool's mission yet? Elara shot him a sidelong glance, a faint smile playing at her lips. I'd call it a miracle mission. But then, those tend to require a bit of foolishness. Jax chuckled, though there was tension in his voice. Well, miracles are all we have left. He looked out at the gathered fleet, a fraction of what it had once been. They know what we're up against, but they're still here. Elara nodded, her gaze scanning each ship displayed on the console's screen. Every pilot, every crew member was there because they chose to be, standing together despite the overwhelming odds. She knew the names of many who'd fallen, and she felt their weight like stones around her neck, but she couldn't let herself falter. The fleet was counting on her to lead, to give them hope when hope seemed impossible. Attention, all units. Elara's voice carried over the comms, firm and resolute. This is our last stand. We're going straight into the heart of their empire, and we're going to strike hard and fast. We've seen what the Xar'uk can do, and we know the cost. But we also know that if we fall here, the Xar'uk will spread across the galaxy unchecked. Every planet, every life will be at their mercy. We fight not only for Earth, but for every voice silenced by their tyranny. A silence fell across the comms as her words settled over the fleet. She felt the weight of it, but also the power in the shared resolve of each person on board. Let's make them remember us, she finished, her voice low but charged with conviction. Let's make sure that if we fall, they'll never forget who dared to stand against them. The fleet moved out, their engines flaring as they angled toward the Xar'uk command base. As they approached the edges of Xar'uk space, they activated every ounce of stealth technology they had. The command base came into view, a massive, imposing fortress on a dead, rocky world surrounded by layers of orbital defense platforms and ships. The fortress itself bristled with weaponry, surrounded by a shielded wall that could repel even the strongest plasma rounds. Xar'uk, the Tezon general, appeared on the console beside Elara, his expression grim. Their defenses are dense, Captain. They'll see us the moment we're within range. We won't be able to avoid a fight, Elara replied, her gaze fixed on the display. But we can make them think we're larger than we are. She outlined her plan quickly, detailing how half of their fleet would break off to create decoy readings. The Xar'uk would see them as a larger force, hopefully scattering their defenses in an attempt to cover more ground. Meanwhile, Elara and her strike team would aim directly at the fortress, using the confusion to penetrate their outer defenses. Ready your ships, she commanded, her voice steady. This is it. As the decoy ships broke off, a flood of Xar'uk vessels surged toward them, drawn by the readings. Laser fire and plasma bolts exploded in the void as the decoys engaged, giving Elara's team a narrow window to push through to the main defense line. The Resolute led the charge, darting between heavy fire from the Xar'uk's orbital platforms. Mako, stationed at the weapons control, fired relentlessly, disabling turrets and clearing a path. Jax's squadron followed close behind, releasing high-impact charges that detonated across the shielded walls, weakening them with every hit. "We're through the first line!" Jax shouted, his voice filled with adrenaline. Heading toward the fortress, the command base loomed larger, its surface covered in thick armor plating that seemed impenetrable. But they had a plan, one final gamble that could give them the edge. Kyle, the Tezon intelligence officer, had located an exhaust port that funneled excess energy from the fortress's core. If they could hit it with a concentrated blast, it would overload the shields for a brief moment, giving them a chance to break through. "Jax, I need you to hit that port with everything you've got," Elara ordered, marking the target on his display. "Roger that," he replied, his voice tense but steady. Going in. Jax's fighter angled toward the port, dodging fire from the fortress's defense cannons. He lined up the shot, his focus razor sharp, and released his payload. The high-impact rounds struck the port dead on, causing a chain reaction that rippled through the fortress's shield generator. For a heartbeat, the shields flickered and failed. Elara didn't waste a second. "All units target the fortress now." The fleet unleashed a barrage of firepower, every cannon and missile launcher converging on the exposed section of the fortress. Explosions erupted along its surface as the armor buckled under the assault, revealing structural weaknesses beneath. But the Xar'uk were quick to respond, rallying their forces and pressing forward with renewed fury. One of the Tezon ships was hit, spinning out of control before detonating in a brilliant flash. The loss was palpable, a harsh reminder of the stakes they faced. Elara gritted her teeth, focusing every ounce of her willpower on pushing forward. "We're taking too many hits, Captain," Mako called out. "Shields are down to 10%. Elara's mind raced. She knew they were reaching their limits, and every second counted. "Pull back anyone who can't maintain formation. The rest of us press on." Jax's voice broke through, strained but determined. "I'm still with you, Captain. Let's finish this." With the shield down, Elara's strike team closed in, targeting the fortress's exposed core. They unleashed a final barrage, plasma and missiles converging on the target. The core exploded in a fiery blaze, sending shockwaves through the entire fortress as systems short-circuited and defenses fell silent. Elara nodded, feeling the depth of his words. The alliance they had forged here was something rare, born not out of convenience but necessity, strengthened through blood and sacrifice. It was an alliance that could shape the future of the galaxy, one forged in the darkest moments and destined to shine a light on all that came next. The fleet began to move, gathering their remaining forces and navigating through the debris. Medical teams worked tirelessly, assessing the wounded and rescuing those who'd managed to survive on crippled ships. Jax coordinated the recovery efforts, his voice calm and steady as he gave orders, helping to direct the survivors toward the Resolute. As Elara watched the teams at work, a sense of purpose began to take hold within her. They had won, but now they needed to ensure that their victory would be lasting. The Xar'uk were defeated, but remnants of their empire still scattered the galaxy. They had to act swiftly, ensuring that no remaining forces could regroup and launch a counterattack. "Jax, I want you and Mako to gather every bit of data we have from the battle. Pinpoint any remaining Xar'uk strongholds, especially those isolated from their command network. If there are stragglers left, we need to take them out before they can regroup." "Understood, Captain," Jax replied, his tone laced with resolve. "We'll sweep the outer sectors. Make sure nothing slips through the cracks." Elara then turned to Xar'uk. "General, we'll need the Tezon's help in this. We have to act quickly to secure the galaxy and help those planets still living under the Xar'uk's shadow. If we stand united now, we can rebuild stronger than ever." Xar'uk nodded, his amber eyes gleaming with a renewed sense of purpose. "The Tezon stand with you, Captain Quinn. We have fought alone for too long. It is time to unite, to ensure no tyrant rises to replace the Xar'uk." As the hours passed, Elara and her team coordinated a galaxy-wide broadcast, reaching out to worlds still reeling from Xar'uk oppression. Planets that had fallen silent under Xar'uk rule responded, voices crackling over the comms as leaders, civilians, and soldiers across the stars offered their support. Hope rippled through the cosmos as world after world learned of the Xar'uk's defeat. The combined human Tezon fleet made its way toward a new outpost, a neutral station where delegates from liberated planets would meet to discuss the future. They had fought to win the galaxy's freedom, and now it was time to shape what that freedom would look like. The Resolute took its place among the gathered ships, a symbol of resilience and unity. Inside the outpost's council chamber, Elara sat alongside Xar'uk and a growing assembly of representatives from liberated planets. Together, they discussed rebuilding, sharing resources, and forming a coalition to ensure that no empire could ever again hold the galaxy in chains. One by one, each representative pledged their support, vowing to stand united in peace and strength. The galaxy was beginning to heal, each pledge a stitch in the fabric of a new alliance. After the meeting, Elara and Xar'uk stood at the viewport, gazing out at the gathered fleet. The galaxy was vast and uncertain, but for the first time it felt like they had a real chance to protect it. A soft hum filled the air as the outpost came alive with the sounds of rebuilding, of hope. Xar'uk glanced at Elara, a faint smile breaking through his usually solemn demeanor. "You know, Captain, I've spent my entire life fighting, never knowing if we'd ever see this day. Now that it's here, I'm not entirely sure what to do with it." Elara chuckled softly, the weight of victory settling into a bittersweet satisfaction. "I know what you mean. We've all been fighting for so long that peace feels strange, but we'll learn. Together, we'll figure it out." As they watched the stars, Elara felt the echoes of those they had lost in every quiet moment, in every gentle sound. She knew that this victory had been won at a great price, and she would never forget the ones who had sacrificed everything. Their memory was woven into the new alliance, a reminder of the cost of freedom and the resilience of those who fought for it. In the days that followed, the alliance continued to strengthen. Survivors from across the galaxy joined the coalition, sharing knowledge, technology, and culture. The fleet became a symbol of unity, a powerful reminder that even the most terrifying empire could fall when the oppressed joined forces. Hope had spread, and it was unstoppable. And as the stars turned, as the galaxy began to rebuild, Captain Elara Quinn knew that humanity and its allies had secured a future not only for themselves, but for every life that dared to defy tyranny. The Xar'uk had claimed that no species could defeat them, but humanity and its allies had proved them wrong. The Resolute settled into orbit among the stars, its journey far from over, but its purpose clear. Elara Quinn looked out into the vastness, her heart full of a quiet, steady hope. They had won their freedom, and now they would use it to protect the galaxy and every voice within it. Together they would forge a legacy that no empire could ever silence.